Oh, sure.
Okay, let me now. Are you ready to take over? Okay, we'll introduce you now.
Are we using a mic or what?
Yes, the mic is right here.
You got to put it up, don't you?
I don't know.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Your voice is beautiful. We hear it.
Right. Okay, I'd like to introduce Linda Gross, who is our program chair. You've met her, kind of.
Linda. Yeah, Linda.
How are you?
It's a mixture.
Good.
It's a mixture.
Are we
Ladies,
going to use this
yes,
mic?
yes, and it sits like this. Are you more comfortable? Do you want to turn to it? Would you rather sit on the other side of it? Try it this way, see how it
Is
works.
this going to work?
Yeah, they hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Ladies and gentlemen, there was an interview several years ago, I think you remember, and the interviewer said to him, "How do you define science fiction?" His answer was, "It's a fantasy." Well, my friends, did you ever think you would be in a fantasy, that you'd even be in the same room with Bradbury?
Oh, yes.
That is a dream come true.
Yes.
And I'm not going to go on. It is only a little bit to say that to be accomplished on your own right is a fantastic thing to have in your life and to be recognized for. But he's not only accomplished, he has inspired. And with that, there's really nothing else I can say except, please, Mr. Bradbury, do your thing.
Is this it? All right. Well, the important thing is libraries have been part of my life, very important, along with the influence not only of authors but motion pictures. I was born in Waukegan, Illinois, and my mother was a maniac for movies, and she took me to see all the early Lon Chaney films. I was 3 years old when I saw The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I was hoping I was going to grow up and be a hunchback. And the next year, 1924, I saw Lon Chaney's film, He Who Gets Slapped, and then when I was 5, I saw The Phantom of the Opera, and Lon Chaney was in my life completely. In that same year, a film came out about dinosaurs. The great beast made into a film in The Lost World in 1925. And the dinosaurs became part of my life. And they existed all the way up into my 30s, and I wrote 3 dinosaur stories. And they changed my life forever and got me hired to write Moby Dick, because I wrote about dinosaurs. But the important thing in my hometown was the library. And my idea of living is every Monday night, when I was 6 years old, to run down to the library and to meet all my friends there. The Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum, and all of his characters in the Oz books, and Edgar Rice Burroughs' books on Tarzan, and the Martian books he wrote, so that I was influenced. And when I was 9 years old in Waukegan, Illinois, one of the big influences was Buck Rogers appearing in the daily paper. This is October 1939, just when the Depression was beginning. But I saw that first panel of Buck Rogers about the future, and it pulled me up and shoved me into the future. And I never wanted to change. I was collecting comic strips and hoping to be part of the whole environment. So you have all these things influencing me, and the important thing happened when I was 12 years old. A carnival came to my hometown, and there was a man named Mr. Electrico in the carnival, and he sat in an electric chair, and they electrocuted him right in front of you. So I went down there on a Friday night before Labor Day when I was 12 years old, and I saw Mr. Electrico put in his electric chair, and they turned the power on, and he had a wonderful sword full of electricity, and he saw all of his boys standing down below his platform, and he pointed his sword at all these kids, and he came to me, and he put the sword on my brow, on the tip of my nose, and cried, "Live forever!" And I thought, my God, why did he do that? I wondered why he said it to me, what he saw in this 12-year-old kid there. So I left the carnival, and the next day, one of my favorite uncles had died. I had to go to his funeral. I had to go to the graveyard, and when it was over, my father was driving my mother and my brother and myself back to the house for a wake with all my relatives, and I said to my father, "Stop the car." And my father said, "Why? You got to go home for a wake for your uncle." I said, "No, let me out of the car." So my father was furious with me, and he let me get out, and the car drove off with my father swearing at me, and I looked down at the lake, and I saw the tents that housed Mr. Electrico. So I ran down the hill. What was I doing? I didn't know. I know now. I was running away from death one night. I was running away from the funeral parlor and the graveyard. What was I running to? I was running down the hill to the carnival and to Mr. Electrico. But because he promised me I could live forever. So I got close to the carnival, and I saw that Mr. Electrico was sitting on a bench out in front of the tent as if he were waiting for me. And I got very shy because how could I go up to him and say, "How do you live forever? What's the answer?" So I had a magic trick in my pocket, and I took it out and I handed it out to Mr. Electrico, and I said, "Can you teach me how to do this?" So he took the trick and he showed me how to do it. And then he looked into my face, and he said, "Would you like to meet my friends in the tent here?" And he pointed to the tent full of freaks. And I said, "Yes, sir." So we walked over to the tent, and he hit it with his cane. He shouted, "Clean up your language! Clean up your language!" And he took me in to meet the illustrated man, and the fat woman, and the skeleton man, and the acrobats, and the high wire people. And then he took me down on the beach, and we sat on a dune. And I listened to his small philosophies, and he listened to my large ones. Because 12-year-old boys are full of large philosophy. So in the middle of the night talking to me, he stopped me suddenly, and he said, "I'm glad you're back. It's been a long time. You were my best friend in the Battle of the Ardennes Forest outside of Paris in 1918, and you were wounded in that battle, and you died in my arms, and now you're back in the world. Your body's changed, your name has changed, but shining out of your face is the soul of my friend, and the last time I saw him was outside of Paris in 1918. So what had he done? The night before, he said, "Live forever," and this day he was telling me I already lived back in 1918 in Europe. Now why did he do that? How come? What did he see in my face? What did he see in my persona that he said something like that to me? So I took his name and address. He was Mr. Electro lived in Cairo, Illinois, down at the tip of the state, and he told me he was a defrocked minister from the Presbyterian Church, and he saw something in me that made him talk. So I said goodbye to him. I walked back through the carnival to the merry-go-round, to the carousel, and the horses were going around and around and around to the music of beautiful Ohio. And I stood there weeping, tears running down my cheeks, because I knew something had happened to me. I knew I was becoming something. I knew I was already part of the past, but I was part of the future, and I was 12 years old. And the next day, my father put my mother and my brother and myself in a car, and we drove out to Tucson, Arizona, where we lived for a year. When I got to Tucson, they bought me a toy typewriter, a dial typewriter, and I began to write it. And from that day, I wrote a sequel to the Martian stories of Edgar Rice Burroughs at the age of 12. And I've been writing every single day for the last 75 years because Mr. Electrico told me to do it.